There's a quiet desperation that lives beneath the surface of most lives. It doesn't scream, it doesn't demand, but it's there like a whisper at the back of your mind, always reminding you of the things you haven't yet managed to control. Take Myra, for example. She's in her early 40s, a single mother juggling work, parenting, and a crumbling sense of certainty. Each morning, she wakes up before the sun, preparing breakfast, checking emails, lining up a to-do list that never seems to shrink. There's a comfort she finds in structure and calendars and reminders and rules and predictable outcomes. To those around her, Myra is efficient, capable, in control. But inside, she's exhausted. The truth is, Myra isn't alone. Many of us mistake control for peace. We tell ourselves that if we can just hold all the pieces tightly enough, nothing will fall apart. If we anticipate every problem, protect ourselves from every surprise, maybe, just maybe, we won't be caught off guard by life's wild and unruly nature. But life doesn't bend to our will, and the tighter we grip, the more it slips through our fingers. One evening, Myra's son, Leo, asked her a question. Something small, something ordinary. Why do you always look so tired, Mama? She smiled, tried to brush it off, but the question lingered in the air. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind, always seeking answers, tried to solve her weariness like a math problem. It wasn't just tiredness. It was the weight of control, the invisible burden of trying to manage a life that, at its core, is unpredictable. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a concept known as anicca impermanence. It tells us that all things are in flux, that nothing stays fixed, no matter how tightly we hold on. Control then becomes a kind of illusion, a trick we play on ourselves to avoid the discomfort of change. There's a parable told in Buddhist tradition. A man is crossing a river. The current is strong, and he needs a raft to reach the other side. He finds some wood, ties it together, and floats across. Once he reaches the far bank, he lifts the raft onto his back and begins walking with it, carrying it through forests, up mountains, into towns. People stare. He struggles. Eventually, a wise old monk sees him and asks, "Why are you carrying that raft?" The man replies, "It helped me once. I might need it again." The monk smiles gently. "But you've already crossed the river. How many rafts do we carry? Old solutions, old identities, old forms of control that once protected us but now only weigh us down." Myra's obsession with control was her raft. It got her through difficult years, divorce, job loss, anxiety. But it had become her prison. She couldn't laugh freely, couldn't rest, couldn't just be. She had confused vigilance with wisdom. But wisdom isn't about never being caught off guard. It's about learning to dance with the unexpected, to bow to uncertainty instead of trying to erase it. Myra didn't become a Zen master overnight. There was no dramatic awakening. But slowly, gently, she started asking herself one question each day. What if I let go just a little? One morning, she didn't check her emails first thing. She sat with her tea. She breathed. The sun rose just the same. The world didn't fall apart. Later that week, she allowed herself to miss a deadline. Not out of laziness, but because her son had asked to walk slowly through the park. She noticed the way light danced on the leaves. She hadn't seen that in years. In letting go, she found something startling. Life still moved, even without her constant steering. The Buddhist path doesn't ask us to be passive, but it does ask us to recognize the futility of clinging. When we cling to control, we shrink our world into something we can manage. But in doing so, we miss the raw, chaotic beauty of what is. The laugh that erupts in the middle of a serious conversation. The rainstorm that cancels our plans but delivers a quiet evening we didn't know we needed. The mistake that becomes a turning point. We often believe that wisdom is knowing more, preparing more, being more precise. But sometimes wisdom is just this, stepping back, softening the grip, and letting the river flow. Myra still keeps a calendar. She still cares, but now she holds her life the way one might hold a bird open-palmed, gentle, ready to let it fly. We tend to think of wisdom as a light, something that guides, protects, and frees us. And most of the time, it does. But like any powerful tool, wisdom can be misused. It can become armor. It can become a cage. Imagine someone who spent years studying spirituality. They can quote scriptures. They understand emptiness, impermanence, compassion. They speak softly, their presence calming. But behind the surface, there's a subtle tension, a tightness in how they correct others, and how they guard their identity as a wise person. This is the trap, when wisdom becomes a performance. There's a monk in a well-known story. He was known across the province for his knowledge. People came from miles away to hear him teach. One day, a young novice approached and asked, "Master, what is the most important truth?" Without hesitation, the monk replied, "Emptiness." The novice bowed and thanked him. Later, another student came and asked the same question. The monk answered, "Compassion." The novice overheard and was confused. "Master," he said, "you told me the answer was emptiness. Now you say it's compassion. Which one is true?" The monk paused, smiled softly, and said, "If you cling to either, you miss the point." This is where wisdom cuts both ways. When we cling to the form of wisdom, we lose its spirit. It becomes rigid, dogmatic. A sword once meant to cut through illusion now turns on its owner. This happened to Daniel. He had spent years healing from a chaotic childhood, one filled with unpredictability, emotional distance, and a deep yearning to be understood. Through books, therapy, and spiritual retreats, he found frameworks that brought him comfort. He began meditating daily, practicing mindfulness, and speaking in the gentle tone of someone who had found clarity. But something was off. Whenever someone disagreed with him, he would quote teachings, not to connect, but to correct. When friends opened up about their pain, he would bypass it, offering a neat spiritual truth instead of true empathy. "Remember," he'd say, "everything is impermanent, or there's no self. So why hold on?" It sounded wise, but it didn't feel wise. One friend, after a particularly cold conversation, said to him, "Daniel, I'm not asking for enlightenment. I'm asking you to sit with me in my mess." And Daniel realized he had been using wisdom as a shield, not out of malice, out of fear. He was afraid of being pulled back into chaos, of feeling helpless. So he wrapped himself in spiritual knowledge and used it to control the conversation, the emotions, even his own vulnerability. Wisdom, misused, had become a form of emotional control. Buddhism speaks of upaya, or skillful means. It reminds us that truth is not a club to wield, it is a bridge to build. The goal is not to be right, but to be free. And freedom includes the freedom to not always know, to not always explain, to simply be present. In the Dhammapada it says, "Greater than one who conquers 1,000 men in battle is one who conquers himself." But what if we use spiritual wisdom to avoid that very conquest, to avoid looking inward, to avoid discomfort? Daniel began to soften. He stopped quoting during arguments. He started listening without fixing. One evening, during a long walk with his sister, she cried about their father, the anger, the longing, the unresolved ache. Daniel felt the urge to say something profound, but he didn't. He stayed quiet. He just let her cry. And when she was done, she whispered, "Thank you for not trying to teach me anything." In that moment, his silence was the truest wisdom he had ever offered. We all have a need to feel safe. For some, safety comes through control. For others, through knowledge. But knowledge without heart is brittle, and heart without presence is absent. Real wisdom is fluid. It adapts. It listens. It doesn't need to be displayed. In Zen, there's a saying, "When the mouth opens, all the teachers disappear," which is to say real understanding doesn't always need words. It is felt, known, shared in silence and presence in the way we show up without needing to fix or define. If wisdom becomes a way to avoid intimacy or vulnerability or uncertainty, then it no longer frees us, it binds us. Like a rope once meant to help us climb, now coiled tightly around our chest. So ask yourself not, am I wise? But am I free? And not, do I know enough? But can I sit with not knowing? Because sometimes the most courageous wisdom is simply letting the moment be what it is, raw, tender, unpolished, and choosing again and again to meet it with love instead of control. There's a subtle way in which insight, once a window to freedom, can turn into a wall. It begins innocently enough. You start to notice patterns. You see the cycles, how pain often repeats, how people protect themselves, how stories echo through generations. You recognize the ego in others. You recognize it in yourself. And with this recognition comes a kind of relief. You think, now I see. Now I understand. I won't be fooled again. But if you listen closely, beneath those thoughts is another voice, a quieter one, a scared one that whispers, I don't ever want to be hurt again. So, we use insight as armor. It happened to Lena. She had spent years healing from a betrayal that broke her open. A best friend, someone she called a sister, had left without explanation. One day they were talking about vacation plans. The next, she was gone. No call, no goodbye. The pain had stunned her. In the months that followed, Lena immersed herself in self-inquiry. She read about attachment, about projection, about the impermanence of relationships. She understood that people leave. That clinging only deepens suffering. She even felt grateful for the lesson. But there was something she didn't see. She had stopped letting people get close. She smiled. She listened. She offered wise words to friends going through their own heartbreaks. But when someone reached for her, not just emotionally, but vulnerably, she stepped back. Not obviously, just enough to feel in control. She told herself she was protecting her peace, that she had grown past drama. But in truth, she was still carrying the wound, only now it was wrapped in spiritual language. This is the danger of subtle avoidance. When we understand too quickly, we stop feeling deeply. When we explain pain, we sometimes mute its voice. When we name a pattern, we may forget that the heart is still breaking beneath it. There's a story told in the Theravada tradition. A man is bitten by a poisoned arrow. Instead of pulling it out, he demands to know who shot it. What was their caste? What kind of bow did they use? What direction did it come from? The healer says, by the time you finish asking your questions, you will be dead. Sometimes the wise thing isn't to analyze the arrow. It's to feel its sting and let it be removed. Insight without softness becomes hardness. Clarity without compassion becomes distance. In Lena's case, she didn't realize she was lonely until someone finally said it out loud. Her younger cousin had come to stay for a few days. One evening, while they were sharing stories over tea, the cousin paused, looked at her gently, and said, "You're always saying beautiful things, but it feels like there's a glass wall between us." Lena's heart dropped. She didn't expect it. She wanted to deny it. But something in her knew it was true. That night, for the first time in years, she wept. Not because someone had left her, but because she had been leaving herself moment by moment, in the name of understanding. Buddhism doesn't ask us to become untouchable. It asks us to become real, present, awake not just to truth, but to tenderness. A cracked bowl, the saying goes, holds light in a way a perfect one never can. And a heart that is broken, when kept open, glows with a wisdom far deeper than words. In Zen, there's a practice called just sitting, no mantra, no visualization, no agenda. Just presence. What arises, arises. What hurts, hurts. And it is met, not fixed. Touched, not dissected. This practice teaches us something radical. We don't need to protect ourselves with insight. We don't need to guard our pain with cleverness. We can sit in our humanity and still be whole. Lena began to open again, slowly, quietly. She didn't rush. She didn't try to be vulnerable as another strategy. She just started noticing the moments where she held back, where her body tensed, where her smile masked distance. And instead of analyzing them, she breathed through them. One day someone reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. That simple act was more courageous than all her spiritual declarations combined. Because letting someone touch what has been hurt, that is the place where real wisdom begins. Not the kind that protects, but the kind that connects. So ask yourself, am I using insight to avoid feeling? Am I explaining life so I don't have to live it? There is nothing wrong with understanding, but it is not the destination. It is only the gate, and the path raw, uneven, luminous is walked barefoot. Not armored in concepts, but open in heart. One of the most subtle traps on the spiritual path is not failure, but success. The moment we begin to wake up, to heal, to gain clarity, there is a quiet shift inside us. We start to see ourselves differently. We speak more gently. We become more patient. People begin to notice. They say things like, "You're so grounded now," or "You've changed." And slowly, without realizing it, we begin to construct a new identity, the wise one. It feels good, After all, we've worked hard to get here. We've sat in silence, faced old wounds, read sacred texts, surrendered to the unknown. This wisdom feels earned, deserved, and it is. But it is also dangerous, because now we have something to protect. A new mask, a new version of me that we silently begin to uphold. This happened to Aaron. He had been practicing mindfulness for years. After going through a painful divorce, he found solace in Buddhist teachings. He began to rebuild his life with simplicity. No more chasing, no more drama, just presence. Friends admired him. Strangers gravitated toward him. He spoke slowly, always with intention. He hosted meditation circles and offered advice when asked. But then one day, his teenage son accused him of being distant, cold. "You talk about compassion all the time," his son said, "but I can't feel you. You're like a teacher, not a dad." The words struck Arun deeply. His first reaction was to rationalize, to explain how presence is love, how detachment is not the same as disconnection. But something in him hesitated. He remembered his teacher once saying, "The identity of being awake is the final veil." Arun realized he wasn't being cold on purpose. He was being careful, controlled, so invested in being wise that he had forgotten how to be human. This is the paradox. Wisdom without vulnerability becomes performance. The wise self is still a self. It still wants to be seen in a certain way. It still fears falling, failing, or being misunderstood. And in protecting that image, we stop growing. There's a Zen saying, "Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water." But many of us, after awakening, try to look like someone who has awakened. We trade in our old masks ambition, approval, achievement for new ones. Serenity, insight, peace. And slowly we forget the real purpose of the path. Not to become someone, but to become no one. In Buddhism, the concept of anatta, or non-self, is not a rejection of existence. It is a release from identity. It says you are not a fixed thing. You are process, movement, space, life unfolding. The moment we say I am wise, we have lost it. True wisdom is unassuming. It doesn't speak to prove itself. It doesn't need to be recognized. In fact, it often shows up in the quiet moments when we listen without interrupting, when we admit we don't know, when we hold space for our own confusion without trying to spiritualize it. Arun began to change not outwardly, but inwardly. He started questioning his motives, not harshly but honestly. Was he pausing before speaking because he was truly present or because he wanted to appear present? Was his silence kind or was it afraid? These questions weren't comfortable, but they were liberating. He began laughing more with his son, making mistakes, forgetting teachings and remembering how to play. One evening, while walking through the park, his son asked, "Why are you different lately?" Arun smiled, looked up at the trees and said, "I stopped trying to be anything." His son didn't respond right away, but a few steps later he took Aaron's hand. It was the first time in years. There is something so human about letting go of the wise self. We stop needing to quote. We stop needing to guide. We start simply being here, When we drop the performance, life becomes closer. People become more real. The wind feels fresher. The heart less guarded. No longer needing to be seen as wise, we become available to what is truly wise within us. Not knowledge, not perfection, but presence. So ask yourself, do I wear my growth like a robe? Do I hide behind stillness? Do I seek approval through insight? If so, take a breath. Let it go. You don't need to be a teacher. You don't need to be enlightened. You don't need to be admired. You are already whole in your trembling, in your laughter, in your messy, unfinished truth. And that more than any doctrine or display is what sets you free. Control is seductive. It promises safety. It gives us structure. It tells us we are doing well, that we are responsible, that we are mature. It organizes our lives into tidy boxes, plans, routines, goals, intentions. But beneath control often lies fear, a quiet panic that if we stop managing everything, the world will fall apart. Take Naomi, for instance. She prided herself on being calm. Every morning she meditated. Her meals were timed. Her home was minimalist, her calendar color-coded. To everyone around her, she was the embodiment of balance. But inside, she was tight, tense, unwilling to admit it. She didn't allow herself to cry. She reframed anger as low vibration. She avoided anything spontaneous. Even joy had to be scheduled. She believed she was being disciplined. But in truth, she was afraid of falling apart. The Buddha spoke of the middle path, not as a compromise, but as a release from extremes. Control is one such extreme. And when clung to, it becomes a form of subtle violence against oneself. When we suppress our feelings in the name of being good, when we override our impulses to keep things spiritual, when we silence our sorrow to maintain the image of peace, we are not free. We are not whole. We are simply well-decorated prisoners. Control often disguises itself as virtue, but it lacks tenderness. It's the parent who loves their child by planning their every move, but forgets to listen. It's the meditator who masters breath control, but avoids the storm in their chest. It's the seeker who chases stillness, but trembles at the sound of their own heartbeat. Naomi's wake-up moment came in the simplest way. One afternoon, she dropped a bowl. It shattered across the floor, and she couldn't stop crying. It wasn't about the bowl. It was about everything she had been holding in quiet disappointments, unspoken grief, the pressure to never be a burden. That breakdown was her breakthrough, because for the first time, she didn't try to fix it. She just let herself feel it. And in that raw, unplanned messiness, she discovered something radical. Control was not the source of her peace, it was the barrier to it. Buddhism doesn't ask us to be robots. It asks us to wake up. And waking up means seeing not just the world, but our inner habits, especially the ones we've mistaken for strength. The need to control is rooted in mistrust. Mistrust of others, mistrust of life, mistrust of ourselves. It says, if I don't hold everything together, everything will collapse. But what if collapse is not the enemy? What if falling apart sometimes means falling into something deeper? In Zen, there's a concept called mu, emptiness, or no-thingness. It's not nihilism. It's openness, space, the ungraspable flow of life. To live with mu is to allow things to change, to let go of the grip, to trust that even in the unraveling there is meaning. Naomi began practicing differently after that day. She still meditated, but not to stay calm, just to listen. She still organized her days, but allowed space for surprise. She began naming her emotions, out loud, even the ugly ones. She allowed herself to be seen, not as the woman who had it all together, but as someone real. And strangely, in letting go of control, she felt more held than ever. There is a strange and beautiful truth. We often find the deepest peace not when we hold tight, but when we open wide. Let the tears come. Let the laugh burst out. Let the plans change. Let the moment live. Control whispers, be safe. Wisdom whispers, be true. So, ask yourself, am I holding on to this because it serves me or because it shields me? Am I managing life or avoiding it? You do not need to be perfectly in control to be okay. You do not need to manage your way into peace. You only need to return gently, again and again, to this moment. Unclench, unplan, unhide. You are not here to hold everything together. You are here to be whole. There comes a point on the journey when questions no longer bring peace. Not because they are wrong, but because they become endless. Every answer opens another door. Every insight spawns another theory. And slowly, the path that once felt sacred becomes crowded. Crowded with quotes, frameworks, teachings, and expectations. This was the storm that swallowed Levi. He had always been a thinker. Even as a child, he wanted to know why. Why people hurt each other. Why we die. Why we're born at all. When he discovered Buddhist philosophy, it was like finding home. He dove into it, studied sutras, memorized teachings, compared interpretations, attended Dharma talks. His mind was alive with it, and for a while it brought him comfort. But one night, lying awake with a head full of teachings, he realized he wasn't feeling better, he was just getting better at thinking. There was no peace, only theory. He had become fluent in wisdom, but still restless inside. In Buddhism, there is a concept called shunyata, emptiness. It is not emptiness as in void, but emptiness as in freedom from fixed ideas. Freedom from clinging to forms. Freedom from needing everything to make sense. Levi had confused knowledge with liberation. But the mind is a hungry thing. It always wants more. Even on the spiritual path, it tries to collect truths like trophies. It says, I understand now, and clings to that understanding as if it were solid ground. But the ground is always moving. And what if that's not a problem? There's an old Buddhist metaphor of the finger pointing to the moon. The teachings are the finger. But if we keep staring at the finger, we'll miss the moon. Levi realized he had been staring at fingers, dozens of them, arguing over which finger pointed best, and he hadn't looked at the moon in years. The moon is silence. The moon is sitting with not knowing. The moon is the taste of tea, the warmth of a smile, the ache of love, the sound of your own breath. It cannot be theorized, only lived. So he began a new kind of practice. He stopped reading for a while. He sat without agenda, without seeking. At first his mind screamed, "You're wasting time. What's the technique? Where's the insight?" But slowly something softer began to emerge, stillness. Not as an idea, but as an experience. Levi discovered that freedom isn't found through knowing, it's found through being. We are not here to master life like a puzzle. We are here to be touched by it, to be dissolved by it, to feel, to weep, to laugh, to not know and still remain open. There's a line from a Zen koan, "Not knowing is most intimate." It sounds paradoxical, but it's deeply true. When we don't know, we listen better. We see with fresh eyes. We stop pretending we're in control. Wisdom doesn't mean always having answers. It often means having the courage to say, "I don't know," and that's okay. The mind tightens around clarity, but the heart softens in mystery. Levi's days became simpler. He started noticing the world again. The way shadows danced on the wall. The way a breeze carried silence into the room. The way people said, "I'm fine," when they weren't, and how that mattered more than any sutra. He became more present, not because he knew more, but because he needed to know less. He let life speak first, and in that space freedom appeared not as a conclusion, but as a letting go. So ask yourself, am I seeking understanding to soothe my fear? Am I hiding behind knowing so I don't have to feel? Can I stop? Can I rest? Can I trust that the moment is enough even without answers? You don't need to explain your pain to heal it. You don't need to label your joy to enjoy it. Let go of the theory. Let go of the search. Let go of needing life to make sense. Let it be. Let yourself be. The moon is still there. You don't need to name it to see it. You only need to look up and be still. Somewhere along the journey, something shifts. Not because you read the right book, not because you heard the right teaching, but because you're tired not with life but with struggling against it. You've tried everything. You've controlled. You've let go. You've sought knowledge. You've embraced stillness. And now you find yourself standing in a kind of quiet, unsure but open. This is not the end. This is the beginning of surrender. But surrender, as the world knows it, is often misunderstood. It is not defeat. It is not passivity. It is not giving up. True surrender is the moment you stop asking life to be different. It is the moment you say, "Yes, this too." Not because it's what you wanted, not because you understand it, but because it is what is. In the old Buddhist teachings, there's a story of a monk who came to the Buddha in great distress. He was overwhelmed by grief, confused by suffering, desperate for answers. He pleaded, "Tell me how to fix this. Tell me what to do." And the Buddha said, "There is no path that avoids pain, but there is a path that walks through it awake." We spend so much energy resisting what is. We think, this shouldn't be happening. I should be someone else by now. If I were wiser, I wouldn't feel this way. But every should is a rope around the neck. Every if only is a door that slams shut in the heart. Surrender is not a one-time act. It is a practice, a breath-by-breath return to presence, a bow to reality. It's looking at the mess and saying, this is part of the story. It's feeling anger and not labeling it as failure. It's letting joy be fleeting and still letting it in. It's waking up and realizing you don't need to fix everything to be free. You don't need to become someone else to be whole. You don't need to control the moment to belong to it. There is an old proverb, The river does not push against the rock. It flows around it. Life is that river, and you are not the rock. You are not the fixed idea. You are not the past. You are not your mistakes or your titles or your control. You are the flow, the breath, the awareness that notices gently, kindly what is here. When surrender takes root in the heart, something incredible happens. You stop needing life to be perfect. And in that moment, it becomes beautiful. Not because it's painless, not because it's predictable, but because it's real. You begin to see grace in the cracks, meaning in the mess, truth in the trembling. The trap of wisdom is thinking it makes you immune. The truth of wisdom is that it makes you tender. You feel more, not less. You open wider, not tighter. And you no longer need a reason for everything. You simply are present, breathing, and enough. So let the control drop. Let the questions rest. Let the fear breathe. Sit quietly and notice. The world is still turning. Your heart is still beating. The sun still rises. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are here, exactly where you're meant to be. And this simple, wild, uncontrollable life is sacred, not because you made it that way, but because you finally stopped trying to.